We got a great turnout here today. This is going to be fun. So I'm here to just introduce the speakers and presenters here. So we are at the Comics and STEM education panel. So for those, I'm sure you already know, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it's all covered by these guys. I'm really excited to see what they have to say because I have a son and daughter, school age, and ever since their science project last year, I've been very curious about this program, and we're doing projects together, and now to integrate comics into it is just really exciting for me. So our panelists are Matt Brady, Shari Brady, and Jim McClain. Applause is welcome.
You're gonna jump on the chair next time.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to them for their presentation.
Okay. Hi there. I'm Matt Brady. I'm kind of half of, I'm half of the first half of who will be talking. My wife Shari and I are, we run a website called The Science Of. We are both science teachers. I teach IB physics and chemistry, and I'll let my wife introduce herself.
I'm Shari Brady. I teach IB biology. I've taught middle, high, and college level, and I have a PhD in science education.
So they always say start these things with a quote. Let me start with a quote. This is an actual quote from an actual student in my actual class. He is an actual football player on our actual team, which is doing really good this year. And he said, Mr. Brady, if you could make this about football, and he was talking about honors physics, I could understand everything. I made him a deal. I said, I can't really talk about football. I'm more geek than sports fan. I can't really do football. I said, but let me tell you something. What if I make it pop culture? What if I make it something that you'll be interested in anyway? And so last week when we were talking about Newton's 3 laws, I showed this. This was the bell ringer or the warm-up for the day. And it was, well, how is Newton's third law involved in this? We had a really good discussion about this and just how cool Luke Cage is on Netflix, which is pretty cool. But we had it gave them something to hook into. And so going back to my student's quote, I'm sure we have probably a couple teachers here.
How many do we have?
Yeah, how many teachers are... Okay, all teachers. All right, I feel like I'm at a faculty meeting. I promise not to bore you.
Maybe this will be good.
Yeah. But you guys know as well as I do that idea that kids don't want to learn, that kids aren't interested. My student's quote just shot that down again. Many times every year it gets shot down again. They want to learn. It's just they're running into problems where we're not putting it in terms that they can hook into and understand. For instance, let's take physics. That's exciting. Woo! Any physics teachers in the rooms? All right. Kinematic equations. So for my kinematic equations review for my second year physics students, we needed to do something. I didn't want to just run through the labs that you can do are kind of dull, kind of boring. I didn't want to just run through all the equations just look, we can crank through some numbers. So this was last November. A trailer for a movie had just come out then. And I watched the trailer and I thought, wait a minute. There's some kinematics in that. Where he steps off the overpass and falls right into the Escalade. That, fellow physics teachers might remember or recognize, that's a pretty common lab of dropping an object into a moving vehicle down below. That's done time and time and time again. Taken by itself, it's kind of dull. Thus was born the Deadpool Drop Lab. Titling labs, my students have pointed this out to me that all my labs have titles now. There's the Thelma and Louise lab, which we make the car jump off the lab bench and try to land it somewhere. Many other labs just have their own weird little titles. But the idea with Deadpool Drop, my year 2 students did it, my year 1 students heard about it and got so excited that now this year, my year 2 students, who were my year 1 students last year, were waiting to do it, and they just said on the very first day, when are we doing the Deadpool lab? When are we doing the Deadpool lab? So we did the Deadpool lab. Now with the Deadpool lab, we take what is a normal dry physics experiment and stick this idea of, well, this is Deadpool. This is what you saw in that trailer happening. It can be, okay, you're the special effects team showing that this is a proof of concept, that this can work. Or this can be your Deadpool jumping into a vehicle. I set up the experiment. I told them what it was. I showed them the clip. And by the way, part of this is a practical guide to integrating pop culture and comics into your classes. If you ever use Deadpool, don't ever use Deadpool. I thought this year, since the movie was out, I might be able just to take that clip from the... No. If you don't remember, right at the beginning of that, when he's talking on the overpass, he says, you might wonder whose jubblies I had to fondle to get the... No, don't use it. Use a GIF. If you go to Jiffy, that little clip that you saw, I put that up there. You can find that. So I set this lab up, framed it as Deadpool drop, not as anything dry. And for the first 30 minutes, it gets really quiet in class. And they're working hard to figure things out. Now, I'm not helping out at all. I just tell them they got to figure this out. So they're working pretty hard. And then theory starts to hit reality. And then they have to start to figure out, well, how are we going to set this up? And like you may have done this lab, or you do labs, practical labs, there's no testing. It's all, you run your numbers, you set things up, you make sure things work, and then you trust what you do, and you trust in yourself that once it's all said and done, hopefully you can get something that looks like this out of it. I love slow motion on iPhones. Wait for it. Thunk. There it is. Oh, my kids will be thrilled that they got applause. And this is, by the way, a gratuitous shot of their setup. Because I told them if I could use their film, I would show a gratuitous shot of their setup. And you'll notice, that was not Deadpool. It wasn't an action figure, and it certainly wasn't an Escalade. But they didn't refer to it as a marble. They referred to that thing they dropped as him. When I have to drop him, okay, I'm ready to drop him. He's ready to drop. He's ready to go. He's ready to step. And it wasn't a thing anymore. So they were invested in this lab, more so than they would be if I said, we're going to drop a marble. And by the way, that drop was done by a student by hand. I don't have one of the electric things that you push a button and it goes shrink. I don't have that. I had a student's hand up there. And sometimes the students can get nervous and they get a bit sweaty and the marble sticks. But this was something now that instead of just a dry, boring lab, they were invested in. They had a hook into it. And it's certainly not just this one thing. Something both my wife and I do in our classes is we try to fold that pop culture in to find some hook that can get our students interested. That was the, whoops, there we are. That's the write-up I use for the Deadpool drop. I just go ahead and put a little clip on there and show and say what it is. I use an Iceman for thermophysics or thermochemistry. I use one from Frozen, same idea with thermochemistry. We do an egg drop where I give the students 10 sheets of paper and an egg and say, make something, you got a half an hour, make something to decrease the impulse so it doesn't break when you drop it. And by the way, the good grades start at 2.5 meters. Ecology, even with Finding Nemo, of course, fold that into biology or earth and environmental classes. And of course, I guess the granddaddy of these would be Spider-Man not rescuing Gwen. This particular one, just a quick anecdote, I was kind of running through this yesterday in front of my class, and I was just telling them, they were insanely jealous that I was coming here. But I showed them this presentation, and I showed this slide with this worksheet on it. And one of my students, who's now in my year 2 physics class, said, Mr. Brady, that is the slide, or that is the project that got me to enjoy physics. And this was, we didn't do any kind of experiment with it. It was just, tell me why Gwen Stacy died. And I kind of cribbed some stuff from a source that had her mass and things like that on it. But from that, they were able to figure out the impulse and what happened and the little snap that you see right behind her neck. If you've never seen this, it's a very sad issue of Amazing Spider-Man. But again, this stuff pulls your students in. It hooks them. And I was listening to an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson the other day on, he was on the Nerdist podcast. And he kind of said the same thing, that he keeps the pop culture there, but adds the science to it, or talks about the science with it. So you still have the pop culture, but now you have maybe a deeper understanding of it, a deeper interest in it. Now, of course, with Neil deGrasse Tyson and what he does with pop culture, your mileage may vary on whether or not he just leaves it there for you to enjoy. But that's what we try to do. You got to find that hook. And so we've talked about, my wife and I have talked about and talked with other faculty, both in our district and in our department. We work at the same school, which is awesome, by the way. She's right across the hall. On how you do this. And these are just some quick things, and I'll send you to a bigger resource later on. I'll show you. Be relevant. If we all teach kids. Most of us teach kids. This is still, I guess, feels like it's going in and out. But you've probably realized, just in talking with students or teenagers or children, your kids, that if your reference to pop culture is more than 5 years old, they are looking at you like you are the mummy, and you might as well be showing a silent movie. If you want to use Star Wars, great. Use The Force Awakens. Don't even touch the originals unless you set it up and really set it up. Don't bite off more than your students can chew. This is not an invitation or an endorsement of showing a full movie to your class with a 3-page worksheet that says, okay, what did you see? Remember back when? Just show the clip. That my kids would get upset because I'd only show them that tiny little clip of the Deadpool trailer, just a tiny little bit, but that was all I needed. Invest in the pop culture you're using. Most of us are teachers at a comic book convention. We're kind of invested in pop culture. The more they see of you, that this is something that you enjoy, of course, the more they're going to be interested in it, because suddenly now you're not just that weirdo up there trying to get them to like STEM. You're that weirdo who also likes Deadpool, who's trying to get them to like STEM. So there might be something more that they want to listen to when you're talking to them. Simplify. Make it narrow in its focus as well. Use the examples for one thing. Don't leave any, that's just good lesson planning. Don't leave any roads open that students can go down. Work through it yourself first, of course, because your students sometimes might find those roads that you thought you closed off. And don't reinvent the wheel. There are lots of resources out there about this. If you haven't done this and you're wanting to start this, plenty of places to go. Back when I was flipping through the worksheets that I use, the Iceman one that I use for thermochemistry, I got the idea from Kyle Hill at The Nerdist, who's also the new host of the upcoming new Mythbusters series. He does a video series called Because Science on The Nerdist, and I've talked with him, and he said that he always makes sure those things are classroom ready. And so what I did on the Iceman with thermochemistry, and by the way, if you turn your body into solid ice, you are basically a bomb going off because you have to get that heat away from you somewhere. I set up the worksheet, had my kids work through it, and they all really thought it was cool that they got the answer. And then I showed them the video clip, and it's maybe 7 minutes long, and they watched it and they understood it. And they were so proud of themselves. These are 11th graders. They were so proud of themselves for understanding all these big science words that this guy on the video was saying. So there are lots of resources. James Kakalios, who's a physics professor, wrote The Physics of Superheroes. I would advise that as like an upper level physics book. It is a textbook, really, pretty much. But that's where I got the masses for Gwen Stacy and the kind of the idea and the application of that one as well. And of course, other science communicators, Neil deGrasse Tyson in his Star Talk, that I guess they're filming tonight, an episode, just for some seeds of ideas. As for the why, I will hand it over to Dr. Brady. She can make pretty with the education words.
So we can't only use this in physics, obviously. I teach biology, and it can be incorporated there. We do a surface area to volume ratio lab where we look at diffusion and osmosis, and you can use the small clip from Civil War that they just did where Ant-Man had to go large, and even though that's a multicellular organism, you can still use that to sort of hook them into the beginning of the lab, the way that he used the Deadpool to kind of get them thinking about that. So there are lots of it's not just physics, it's not just math, it can be pulled into it. But when we talk about pop culture, they need to see you as a human being, and this is a door into their world. And if you can find that, there's a triangle that we talk about of rigor, relevance, and relationships, that if you can find those three, then you can engage your students and you can hook them. Pop culture allows us to not only build those relationships, but it gives us the relevance that we need, and then the rigor just happens automatically because you got them. They're listening to you. They're invested in that learning, and so then the rigor sort of comes. And you need ideas to do that. If you want to, and so this is where we come in. We're building a library of resources for you to be able to find, organized by category, is the goal. And that way it gives you a place to go. We're not at the point yet where we have, full lesson plans and activities. We're working on that. We've got some issues we need to work through with copyright and trademark issue and things like that. But you can go ahead and kind of walk them through where we...
Yeah, on thescienceof.org, I used to run newsrama.com. It was a comic book news website. I came from science, did 5 years towards a PhD, and got into writing about comic books. Less said about the PhD, the better. And so I speak both pop culture and science, and talking to my wife one day, I said, we could kind of go with this and try something like this, and we have. And just on the picture there, the image there, I spoke with the materials scientist who's actually going to be doing the NSF panel this evening, Savine. I interviewed him to talk about vibranium with Black Panther. One of the smaller ones down there is Nova, who uses a positron beam in a recent issue of Avengers. Positrons, by the way, are antimatter, and it sounds all exotic and foreign in something like Star Trek, and that's what my students thought just last week when we were talking about particle physics. But I pointed out that they are, if they ever knew anybody who had a PET scan in a hospital to see what's going on inside their brain, a PET scan, the P of PET scan stands for positron. So they're injected with a radioactive dye that emits a positron, and when that piece of antimatter touches a piece of matter inside their brain, 2 gamma rays, I believe, are given off, and that's what the computer detects. Their brain's fine, they don't blow up. But it's, again, another hook of just, it sounds real cool and weird, and I hook them with the science fiction, and then say, oh, by the way, this is real, and this happens every day in hospitals across the country. So that's the idea, and you'll find on there, if you dig around on there, all kinds, everything that we've talked about, the Gwen Stacy thing, we do a big piece on that. I think I did Gwen Stacy. I did a big article with a friend of mine on Ant-Man riding the arrow in Civil War. He can't. But if you show that to your students and start talking about momentum and impulse and change and acceleration, now they're hooked because, hey, it's Ant-Man riding an arrow. And then let them figure out he can't. We also have a Facebook page, the Sci of, which we kind of, I hate this word because it's getting overused, we curate a list of links of just cool science, and sometimes I put a video of matching indices of refraction up there recently. Just neat. It's a little bit irreverent, but it's just neat stuff that we would use with our own students in our own classes.
And it's a good resource for quick sort of, warm-ups, bell ringers, that kind of thing, if you're looking for something, even just a homework assignment, because they're short, and they're there, and they're different, and there's always something new every day. So it's, you can put it up if you've got, websites or Canvas or haiku pages in your school, and you can just have that sort of feed. You can pull those and, use those there. So we kind of find the stuff for you, and it saves you time.
Yep. And of course, we're on Twitter and Pinterest. And we'll be around, I guess, for some questions afterwards. And with that, we can hand it over for some M of STEM to Jim. Whoops, hang on. Sorry. There we go. Yep.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sitting down. I can't sit down. I came here from Indiana. Not only am I a teacher, we're having parent-teacher conferences right now. That is winning.
So let's see if I can pry this loose, because I'm not sure everybody can hear me in the back. I can use that teacher voice, but I don't really need to. So I have encountered the same kind of problems that the Bradys are now coming up with copyright problems. About 10 years ago, I started using Teen Titans. Teen Titans Go is very popular on TV. And the kids were into the cartoons, and so I started incorporating them into my worksheets. And then I would do the Flash. I teach math, by the way. I'm a 7th grade math teacher. I've been teaching for, are you ready? 30 years. I'm feeling every bit of it. And I have to apologize for my attire. The last time I came here to speak at New York Comic Con, I was wearing a shirt and tie, and on my way out, I got stopped to ask directions like 50 times. I didn't want that to happen again, so here it is. So I created Solution Squad. I ran into the same problems with copyright, so I created my own superhero team that does math. They all have math-based abilities. And so I've published this single comic 3 years ago. Has anybody ever heard of it before? Oh, good. Some of you actually have. Awesome. So that's good.
I've heard of it.
I know. And so let me run through real quick what it is that I do. Teaching 7th grade math, I have a whole different clientele than the Bradys do, obviously. That's why I have to get up and talk, because my 7th graders wouldn't have stood for that at all. You go, okay, we're going to talk. No, you can't do that. You have to get up and you have to entertain. I always say it's like being half stand-up comic and half academic. So if you can't do that, your 7th graders they're going to turn on you, and then it gets ugly. So with Solution Squad, here's how it works. I have a character up here in the upper left called Absolutia, and what her ability is to raise temperature and lower temperature. When you raise temperature, those are positive integers. When you lower temperature, those are negative integers. And her power is basically such that the higher she moves the temperature one way, or the further she moves it down, the harder it is. And that is the very concept of absolute value. The further a number is from 0. So if you consider the starting temperature in the room 0, then the absolute value is whether she raises it up, lowers it down, it's just how far she had to move the temperature. I use her for adding and subtracting integers. So if you add a positive integer and a negative integer, you're comparing a positive number going up and a negative number going down. Obviously, they're not going to be a higher number. You're going to have to take the net value. And so that's the character that I use for that. And it's really kind of fun, because when I start teaching that, I have them working out problems, and I see them at their seats going, so I know it's working. I don't need data. I can see it. I can see it working in my classroom. The second character is La Calculadora. La Calculadora, of course, means the calculator in Spanish. I have a very large Mexican immigrant population. I love my Mexican students. They're fantastic. I started to learn Spanish just because I had them. I grew up in rural northern Michigan, where I didn't have to learn a foreign language. Why would I learn a foreign language? And I had a good reason to learn a foreign language, so I started to pick up Spanish. La Calculadora is really fast at mental math. She does all the calculations. She's also the leader of the team. Then I have in the bottom left, Equality. Equality can do anything that any of the other characters can do at exactly the same level. And she's got kind of a funny little quirk in that her features are perfectly symmetrical. And her name is a palindrome. Her first name's a palindrome, her last name's a palindrome, all of her family's names are palindromes. So it's all about symmetry and equality. And she is the person that we turn to for learning how to solve equations. Up here we have the ordered pair. The ordered pair is an orphan pair of twins from China. My daughter is an orphan child from China. She does not really have a twin brother, but I had to create a character that is basically based on her. When she runs around with her Abscissa t-shirt on, it's really awesome. The ordered pair, Abscissa, runs along the, anybody? X-axis. And that is, by the way, the term for the x-coordinate in an ordered pair. And ordinate, of course, flies and dives along the, see, you got this already. All right, so together they're called the ordered pair. In their history, Abscissa was born just a few minutes before ordinate. She is also the independent. She's the leader. She's the spirited one. And he's more of a follower. He's a dependent. So what do we have? We have x being the independent variable. We have y being the dependent variable. So just little math puns that work in their personalities and helps us remember what they do. And down here in the lower right, we have Radical. Radical is a surfer dude. He's a time traveler from 1984, and that is exactly how he talks. He's a time traveler, but his ability is the hardest to explain. He creates electromagnetic prisms that are in the shape of right triangles. And he has the ability to move things and surf along the hypotenuse of the right triangle. So we kick in the what? What theorem? Pythagorean theorem, that's right. So all of the characters have their own standards, all the characters have their own activities, and that way I don't have to step on any company's toes. I can do whatever I want, and that's a whole lot of fun. Now, let's start here with the ordered pair. Now, part of the comic, the first comic that I put out is a 32-page print comic, and it started on the web. But the great thing about it, I think, is that they're not only just overt characters that do math stuff, but there are subtle parts in the instruction as well. In this page right here in particular, the calculator is sending Abscissa to recon around the perimeter. She takes off, zoom. She comes back, and Ordinate she sends to the air, zoom, so he flies up. When they move, her hair gets messed up. She's the only character who does not have a ponytail. So when she's standing next to them, her hair's messed up, they just make a little throwaway joke. You might want to consider a ponytail. But now, don't pay attention to the words. Let's just look at what's happening on the page. The first thing that happens, the X goes this way. The second thing that happens is the Y goes this way. And that's how we graph an ordered pair. Once the kids look at that, they will never, ever forget it again. And I have kids come into my class, they're going to want to graph the Y first and then the X. It's like, no, no, no. Remember what happens on that page. Once I tell them that, they go, oh yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I do with the Solution Squad is mnemonic. It just helps them remember things. There are conceptual stuff. There's also conceptual stuff behind it as well. In the book, I also have origins pages. There's a 24-page comic book story, but in the back are 5,000 words of text where their origin stories are. And their origin stories also contain like a database, like the Marvel Comics, Marvel Universe. Back in my day when I was young, we had the Marvel Universe. And it told us how tall everybody was. It told us how much they weighed. It told us how strong they were. So I pretty much did the same thing with all the characters. And then I created a database that kids can do the mean and the median and the mode and the range from their actual heights and weights. And then that also enters into a story that comes later. And of course they fly around in the coordinate plane. Works every time. I love it. So I created this comic. Hold on. I created the comic book as a normal comic book, and it's in print form, and it's in portrait style, the same way that most comics were. Directly after that, all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, I could do something a little bit different here. So what I did is I took the comic and I cut it up and I made it into a digital presentation so that it can be shown on your dry erase or whiteboards or smart boards, depending on what you have. I happen to have just a plain whiteboard with a projector. And so the sequel to the story that is in here is in this digital presentation format already. It's already set, so the images fit on your screen like this, instead of having to look at it like that and use some kind of guided view mess. I also have printable activities. So you guys were talking about you don't quite have lesson plans and stuff like that. I do. I've been at this a while. I've been at it a while longer than they have. I do have lesson plans. I have all kinds of things that they can do. The first comic, in fact, is about prime numbers. It's all about prime numbers. They have the prime number sieve is the general idea behind it. And the characters get caught in a force field trap, and in order to get out of the trap, they have to solve a prime number code. Prime numbers, I don't know if you guys realize this, prime numbers are so useful. In Common Core, oh, I said it. Hey, I teach in Indiana. We don't use it. Ha ha ha. So we have what we call Common Core Light. We have about 80% Common Core. But one of the great things is that in Indiana, prime numbers went from 4th grade on Common Core back to 7th grade, where I like it, because that's where I teach. So prime numbers are very useful because you do prime factorization. You can do a lot of cool things with it. Once you prime factor numbers, you can reduce fractions. Also not a Common Core standard anymore. You can simplify fractions, yeah, but even though it's not a Common Core standard, tell me how algebra students are going to simplify algebraic fractions without knowing how to do it. Derp, right? So I do a lot of stuff with prime numbers. I hit prime numbers all the time. And so they reduce fractions with prime numbers. Then they add fractions using a cross multiplication technique and reducing with prime numbers. I use multiplying prime numbers, dividing fractions with prime numbers. I prime factor everything. Because what that does is it makes them less dependent on calculators. Because if you prime factor numbers that you're dividing, before you divide them, it makes the numbers smaller, and you don't have the common mistakes that everybody makes by doing the Gazinta sign and all that kind of stuff with the long division algorithm. It avoids a lot of mistakes, and that's what we want. We want kids making fewer mistakes. So the logo, even the logo that's on the comic, is graphable on the coordinate plane with only 5 fractions. So that's a fun activity for them to do. You can do translations by making it 3-dimensional. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with this. See, everybody's leaving me now. I'm sad. Go ahead. What else do I have coming? Well, here, I got this coming. Oh, yeah?
You just made early child people very happy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, is Nikki even here? She was going to be here. Nope, she's not. All right. I have a friend who is a math teacher, and a cosplayer, and she's going to be helping me make YouTube videos. I already have YouTube videos. She's going to make my YouTube videos better because she's actually pretty and I'm not. So she is going to be Absolutia making the videos with me.
Are we going to be able to download the YouTube videos because Board of Ed blocks YouTube?
No, not anymore.
Mine doesn't. Mine freed it up. In fact, mine encouraged me to make a YouTube channel using school, so you need to talk to them.
As well as YouTube downloader, you can provide off the administrator.
For administrators.
Or I could just put them on my website.
There's an easy way to download anything from YouTube, and you can put it on your smartboard. Just put SS in front of the website and bring it to a site, and you download it and put like an MP4.
Okay.
Awesome. There you go.
Yes.
I have an action figure. I'm older, so I had Mego action figures when I was a kid. I have a story coming up where the characters all get action figures made of themselves, and then they all come out the same size. Well, as you saw a couple slides ago, Ordinate is 6'8", and his twin sister is 5'0". So to have all of them have 8-inch action figures made no sense. So I have a story coming up where the kids actually have to figure out how tall should the action figures be in relation to each other so that they look right, so they're not all made from the same mold. So you can apply, like the Bradys have, you can apply all kinds of stuff in math concepts, science concepts, to pop culture, action figures, and let's see what else. Oh yeah, and I have puppets. I have puppets of all the characters, and I use those on YouTube videos. So, I mean, there's just no limit to the things that we can do. And this is a page from the upcoming story where they fight a villain called the Confectioneer, and it's all about sugar content. So there's actually a little bit of science thrown in as well. So, you can find me. All you gotta do is put in Solution Squad and go. You will find me. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and my lesson plans are available on Teachers Pay Teachers. I have the first book comes with 25. Oh, it's coming up. Oh, okay. Just look up Solution Squad on Teachers Pay Teachers. You'll find it. And today, I'm giving you all the free copy of Solution Squad, so you don't ever have to pay for that. So all you have to do, go to my website, solutionsquad.net/free, solutionsquad.net/free, and the code, the download code is Never Sleeps, because we're in the city that never sleeps. So you can have the digital presentable version. You can use it on your board, and also we have a couple of freebies on Teachers Pay Teachers that you can use to teach kids how to read comics for the first time. If they don't know how, as many of mine didn't, I had to teach them what a word balloon is, what a thought balloon is. And I made sure to include all of those, word balloons, thought balloons, even whisper balloons in the comic, to make sure that kids got a little sample of everything, just in case they'd never read a comic book before. So, is that all I have?
Okay.
I think. Okay, well, thank you very much.
So I guess that now we're just open for questions if you have them. There was one thing that kind of kept coming up. I know we mentioned it, and Jim mentioned it at the beginning too. Copyright. My wife and I are working with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. They have a very strong educational mission, and we're trying to work out something. We've spoken with some top copyright lawyers that the fund works with. We're trying to work with publishers to come to some understanding, or hopefully maybe some collection of works that can be used or images that can be used for educational purposes. But we don't have that yet. We're still getting that ball rolling. In the meantime, what we tell people, what my wife and I tell people when we're approached about, well, how can I do this or can I have this? We can't give you any of the stuff that we have. We don't own the characters. I don't own Deadpool, and I think if I say Deadpool 4 more times, I owe Disney a nickel. Our advice, and I am not a lawyer, but our advice is make it for your classroom. And unfortunately, this goes counter to a lot of the things we're told as teachers. Don't share, but encourage other teachers to make their own. This is something where you might not be the resource for people, but you can be the inspiration for people. So be careful with copyright. Of course, obviously, never make a frozen thermochemistry sheet and then put it up on Teachers Pay Teachers. You're just asking to give Disney your house at that point. But just be careful. If you have any questions on copyright issues, but just copyright issues, you can shoot me or Shari an email. We have our cards with us and all kinds of contact stuff. But otherwise, I guess just open for questions. Oh, you're gonna.
There's a microphone right there.
Yeah. You want to start lining up.
And we're handing out. Is this even working? This one? How about?
Mine's working.
I hear it now. All right.
Gotta hit it.
So we're handing out Solution Squad bookmarks too, so everybody gets a bookmark as well. It has all that information on it, so you didn't have to write it all down. The free download did.
Hi, you mentioned something with your Ant-Man riding the ant anecdote.
Mm-hmm.
So much of what happens in pop culture violates the laws of science. When you do your lessons, how do you avoid confusing your students or pulling a Neil deGrasse Tyson and bumming them out?
And just ruining the whole thing. Well, yeah. Sometimes it's a delicate balance. Most often, I will set it up as a question of just, could this really happen? And I tell my kids that it's cool. It's definitely cool. Nothing will ever take away from the fact that that was cool. But let's look at the physics. And I kind of draw a line. I don't, I work with high school students, so there is, nobody goes home crying at the end of the day, like 7th graders can. Nobody goes home crying at the end of the day of, Ant-Man's not real. But I draw that line and say, this is the cool stuff, but let's talk about the science of it. And sometimes it's not fun for them to do that, but 9 times out of 10, I can see that they're getting enjoyment because they understand the science of it. They're not just being, not to name check him again because I don't think he's here right now, but he's not like, you're not being Neil deGrasse Tyson on a cranky day. Or you just say nothing's real, it's not, it's all fake. They still enjoy it.
He's not that special anyway. I corrected his math on Twitter once.
I wouldn't do that.
True story.
Hi. I teach Baltimore School for the Arts, so I basically teach artist physics, which is a lot of fun. But one thing I wanted to mention about the copyright, I did a workshop last year where we took a week, full days, almost full days, and did the science of science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised, but got permissions from a lot of people. We had contributors, Nichelle Nichols contributed, Fred Hayes contributed, Andy Weir. So if you do approach the people, especially NASA.
Sure.
There's a lot of resources, and there's actually one. Jerry Woodfill, a former engineer, did an educator's guide using old comic books,
mm-hmm.
which is really good.
Right. Yeah, there is a whole collection. Where Shari and I see things going with when we start developing our own content, we're going to go into the public domain and just start mining that. And if my school email is, my little icon for it is Captain Science, which was 1930s character, just gloriously pulp sci-fi. You can check with various outlets. Andy Weir, of course, he's a super geek at heart. He wrote The Martian, just in case we're throwing names around. And in our experiences, even smaller publishers, comic book publishers, would be okay, and they would give you permission for a one-time or something like that. The problem with that is, how far do you want to cast your net? For something like a week at a school or something like that, it's good to, you can tie it right in. But for something like writing an article on the site, I can see the website and our classroom stuff is a little bit split, where classroom, I'm working on those kids right there, and I can bend some rules and get them interested in something. But on website, for instance, the Ant-Man article in Civil War, I think that ended up getting 25,000 views, which was pretty awesome for a pretty hardcore science article, and it got mentions on all these pop culture sites. I wrote an article about a Valiant character called X-Men Man-O-War, and tied it into time dilation, which is if you travel close to the speed of light, time slows down relative, and brought in Einstein relativity, and tied it all to Mork from Mork as well. I figure he had time dilation when he left Happy Days and then came back in 1977 to his own series. That was time dilation. It was more physics than he thought. That got like not many people reading it, and so it's a matter of I want to get as many people encouraged and interested in science as we can, and so for that, Spider-Man works a whole lot better than Ninjak, for instance. So that's yeah.
Before the entire back section sneaks out, I forgot to mention, because I'm not that shameless a self-promoter yet, that Solution Squad is going to be a 144-page hardcover book that'll come out first quarter this next year.
Woo.
So keep an eye out for it. Like, I have one paper copy, and it's going to be a much bigger book. I've been assembling it and assembling it and assembling it. By the way, I paid for everything myself, so it is self-published. And obviously, as teachers, we know that our finances are limited. It has taken time, but it will be out.
Actually, in connection with that, I have a question. Do you do your own art, or are you collaborating with artists? Or?
I do some of my own art. I don't have time. I'm a full-time teacher, like half the people here. Shari, can you hold up the orange side of my comic? So I did the back cover, the business. If you get one of my business cards from up here, I did the artwork on that. I did the back cover on the comic, but I don't do all the art by any stretch. My niece did the art for the first 2 issues, and I have a new artist named Serena Guerra doing the new art, and with the Candy character that was up here, and she's my new full-time artist. So my niece moved on to do other things, and yes, it's expensive. You have to pay people. I don't recommend trying to get somebody to draw for you for free.
Hi.
Suggestions on integrating this for early childhood.
Thank
you, early childhood people.
Actually,
we tend to get ignored in New York City.
Yeah,
so.
it went by pretty quick, but there was one up there about using Nemo with ecology, because you can actually have them do a very simplified identification key, and using the names of the characters and say, what is Dory, and you can do it for, is it she blue, is she green, and so you can do ecology things that way. But most of the things that we've got on there, you can sort of bring it down a level. And if you're struggling, I mean, that's what we're here for. Our emails are available on the site, and just shoot us an email and we'll put our heads together and see what we can come up with.
I also have some polyhedral dice games that help kids learn how to add, for example, and you check off boxes. My daughter, when I started making Solution Squad, my daughter was a year old. We just had gotten her from China, and so now she's 10. So I've been working on this a while. So as I realized my audience is older than my daughter, and I had said, I got to make some stuff for her too. So I scaled it back a little bit, so there would be things for her as well.
Yeah, and also one other thing I'd forgotten in terms of resources, of just looking out there and seeing, and it goes back to the earlier question too, pretty much everything now, gosh, I think just about all the major releases, movies and television from DC, Marvel, and even some of the other ones, if they have a science fiction twist or thread in them, somewhere there is a science advisor who may have done a video or a blog post about it. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has a science advisor. Agent Carter has a science advisor. Thor had, and I forget his name. He's out in California. He wrote about Particle at the End of Time. Doctor Strange has a science advisor, and I forget his name as well.
Does it have a magic advisor too?
No, there's no David Copperfield.
Had to ask.
But the resources are out there if you start looking. And of course, all the books, there's science of Doctor Who, there's science of superheroes, supervillains, science of Harry Potter, all kinds of things. Not that you can just take and say and put it in your classroom library and say, there you go, check it out. I don't get it. My kids aren't interested. Take those things, develop a lesson from a sliver. The Kakalios book, Physics of Superheroes, I borrowed and expanded on his explanation of Gwen Stacy's death and the physics of Gwen Stacy's death. He has tons and tons and tons of examples from everything from mechanics all the way through nuclear physics in his book that can be adapted very easily.
And sort of what we want to do is to, not so much have, we want to have material there available for you, but it's more from a professional development standpoint of teaching teachers how to do this. Not so much giving you the stuff and saying, here. It's kind of like with the students. You want to teach them from a STEM aspect, teach you how to do this, and then that's how you grow. You grow it in the classroom.
I actually started recruiting. I'm sorry. Did you want to ask your question? Go
I
ahead.
have a question. Do you have suggestions for adult education for ESL learners?
Yeah, it's more like that's what my background is in Latino learners. It's almost like we've got too much. It's to sort of narrow it down some and be more specific. But we can talk after.
This is because we teach in a Title I school, which it used to be 50-50 Black Hispanic students. Now it's actually we're shifting up towards more Hispanic. So that's something that we're looking at too. I think in some instances you'd be surprised, in some instances you wouldn't be surprised. For instance, with my students, when I look out on my classroom of students, it's mostly Black and Hispanic, young ladies and young men. They have much more in common with the Fast and the Furious than they do with the Avengers or the Justice League, and they will tell you that in a heartbeat that they won't use these words because it's not their terms, but they're not being served by DC or Marvel or Disney or Warner Brothers if you want to look at corporates. But they will get behind Fast and the Furious and watch that because they're in the Fast and the Furious. They're not in the Avengers, except for maybe token roles here or there. But you'd be surprised as well of just what your students will gravitate towards. Even I have this insane love in all my classes for Flash on CW. They just love Flash, and usually the day after the episode, we sometimes lose some class time to talk about it in almost all classes.
I don't know if you guys realize or recognize the makeup of my team too. I have 4 girls and 2 boys. My kids always ask, "Why do you have 4 girls and 2 boys?" I said, "Well, there's my Justice League poster. What do you have? 5 guys and 2 girls. There's my Fantastic Four. What do you have? 3 guys and 1 girl. Here's my Avengers." And you can go on and on. So I overbalance the other way just to compensate for that. And I also made sure that all the races that I teach and my daughter were included as well. But not only that, we have body types. We have body type representations. The calculadora is actually what my students call thick. She's 5'4" and 156 pounds, maybe something like that. And so, yeah, that George Perez drew her like a superhero. You got go back one. No, one more. Yeah. Well, okay, she's thinned out because of the perspective of the projector. But trust me, my niece did draw her to be more heavier set than most girls. And Sissa is built like my daughter, which is to say she's a dancer. She's really, really thin, but her legs are super, super muscular. And so the characters all have different body types, and I was very conscious of that when we designed the characters. So that's something to keep in mind too. Yeah, I did it before Faith.
Any other questions? All right.
Come on, there's got to be some more questions.
Well, we'll stick around for a few more minutes. I think we all have contact information and business cards up here if you're interested. But thank you very, very much. This is very encouraging for us. Thanks. Thank you.
Have you read Physics of X?
I'm trying to think if I have that one. I went on like a buying spree on Amazon for all the used books I could find with that.
That has the website and the email address.
Who wrote that?
Off the top of my head, Physics of X-Men is good, and Science of Star Trek.
Science of Star Trek by Lawrence Krauss?
Yes.
That's it. I kind of cribbed from him on inertial dampeners and why you have to have them and why you don't have to have them. Yep.
Okay.
But yeah, the Physics of X-Men.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
Because it also hits
It's like every year, it's around
So it goes
weekend,
into
so
why
if you guys are
Wolverine
educators,
is so
you
hairy.
get
Yeah, well, we're from North Carolina.
Oh yeah, perfect. So you're right on from us. This is just like our press packet, but this is the email for us. And if you guys are interested in coming down this year, definitely give us a call.
Okay, we will take a look at it. I'll let you know.
So his ear's sharper, not because he has super hearing, but because his hearing is constantly repaired from the regular damage that we go through.
That's pretty cool.
And he has berserker rage.
I wouldn't say something start with a comic, but maybe like pieces. What do you teach?
It breaks down like
Is it ESL?
and it goes into like Cyclops' powers work, things like that.
Without the
Like,
kick
I love
back
to
in
work
his
with
head.
them,
He has a really strong neck.
A lot of it comes down to like the power line of these characters. It's usually like strange matter,
Valiant has
or
some good
like
things.
unusual power
Valiant,
sources.
the publisher
that
that's
or he
here,
has access to
they've
that.
got some good things, and just but a lot of it is going to have to be from your content,
I will check
and
them
then
out.
just
Thanks.
kind of like pulling the things that go rather than using the pop culture, using the content, and then seeing where you can.
How do you spell Valiant? VAL?
IANT.
Okay. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Teachers how to do it.
So I know what to do. I love what you guys are doing. I'm actually a school librarian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Because we have grants coming out from the faculty if they want to integrate different kind of lesson plans to help our students stay engaged.
This is who you need to talk to. I speak the pop culture. She's our, it says it on her card, she's the educational outreach.
Hi, my name's Clara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So I work at a community college, February, college, and there's a specific program that we have
works just
where
fine.
they take blocked courses where it's like certain faculty teach to our students, and it ranges from the math, remedial, to science, things like that.
Thanks. I have a lot of fun with those articles. I just kind of.
Yeah, I would tell you to just contact me there, and then we can sort of see. Like I said,
I use
we're full-time teachers, and so
it's marshmallow and
we're
frozen.
kind of
The name of
now
the monster is
trying-
marshmallow, and then I go up, and then Iceman I go down.
We've
And
got
so
more
we do one
materials,
together,
we
and
just
then I give them the other one to do by themselves. And it was just a look of discovery on my students' face when they realized they were just like, I said, what would happen if you were standing beside Iceman and he changed into ice in 2 seconds? And they just kind of looked at their numbers and went,
and a lot of them are really
and that's
What?
so yeah, it's like a matter of.
Asked earlier,
I know we're going to be at some science conventions in North
increased it because
Carolina
now they
and South
understand
Carolina.
something. It's just that that's what makes it work.
We're just at the science, I guess the National Science Teacher, sort of the state level convention.
Oh, okay. Is that more for K-12 rather than college?
Yeah, because I do teach at community college. There's a convention in Raleigh that we're going to be going to that's a STEM sort of blend of higher education and K-12 and community. It's called Bridging the Gap.
Bridging the Gap? Okay, I think I've heard about that.
Yeah, so we're going to be in Raleigh. We're going to be at that one in a couple of weeks. But as far as professional development, that's kind of where we're going. But definitely, send me an email, and then we can, at least we can stay in contact, and then as we start developing things.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. It's nice meeting you.
Tries to follow your
Right.
I've used that to teach limits in calculus for the past 5 years. Because we talk about, okay, where did Kirk expect to be? Where did you want to go?
Yeah.
Does that change your implementation?
Yep.
So we actually get to talk about
And so of all the things, you can get them hooked in on that and holding on. And
so you still hear them later on going, Captain Kirk didn't expect it, so the functions are bad.
Yeah. Great. That is really cool.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh,
at first they were like, you're not going to be here because we're all
professional.
What are you bringing us this time? So yeah, thank you.
Here, take this.
Oh, thank you. I think I have one on
Okay,
there.
then don't take it. We only have
No,
five.
I
I only have five.
No, I mean like I had one like it's floating around this.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So much.
Thanks a lot.
I meant to tell you both actually, if you've heard of the Science and Entertainment Exchange.
Yes.